same population that was 51%, it shrunk to 20%. And we saw in the recent election how popular Sarah Palin really is. And again, I think we have to hold.
But had she been less blithering on foreign policy, that might not have happened. Had the economy not cratered, that might not have happened.
Well, the fact is, though, that she was self-identified as the candidate of values voters. And Republican women fled John McCain because of her. All I'm saying is that if you look at the approval ratings for Bill Clinton throughout his ordeal, under the lash of the Christian right, he was never really, he never really slipped much below 60% approval ratings. The fact, as you suggested, demographically, the country has been growing more and more liberal about sexual matters and more tolerant over the years, which is one of the reasons why the religious right is increasingly desperate, right? And increasingly relies on non- or anti-democratic means like media control and election fraud to promote its agenda. So, I think that there's really a majority or a potential majority on your side of the argument.
Well, that's the hope, right? I mean, my husband, that's the hope. My husband said to me when he drove me to the train station, tell him you're cautiously pessimistic. But I think the point is that, yes, on the one hand, people are living more freely than they did before, right? And in some ways, of course, you could say the religious right is the illegitimate child of the sexual revolution of the 60s, right? Because they've adopted aspects of the feminist demand for orgasm equity for women. They've adopted the concern about domestic violence, women's irritation at men's interest in porn, concern about trafficking. Those are precisely all feminist agendas. They're all now religious right agendas. And they've adopted the idea that you're going to have fabulous sex if you follow our rules. I mean, if they're selling vibrators and explicit sex advice, they are also sexual revolutionaries, right? On the other hand, the most recent studies show that the majority of Americans now wants more restrictions on abortion. It's already pretty restricted in this country. This country gets a D- from Planned Parenthood, right? They want more parental notification, even though the law in California did not pass, although Proposition 8 did, and that horrible law in Colorado that said that life begins at conception didn't pass. Thank goodness, because fertility clinics would be in trouble if that were true, right? And even James Dobson didn't support it. Overall, the majority of Americans now, it's right at the border of 50-50, right, would like more restrictions. So there has been a huge semantic change that's no longer seen as, and 1 in 3 women will have one in our lifetime, right? I mean, this is about heterosexual sex, penis and vagina sex without a condom or a condom that broke. There's something that happens, and that isn't sayable anymore, right? It's all not understood that way anymore. So that's been a big shift. And the other big shift, and I think one of the thoughts I had when you asked me the question about what motivated me, is how much angst there is now about premarital sex. That it's become impossible. Many people would like their kids to wait at least till college, but it's become impossible to say that openly. And I was just really struck, not so much that people, how they're living, but what this becomes sayable in public and what Democratic politicians feel comfortable saying and not worrying about their political position or their constituency. That has definitely shifted to the right. That's where liberals have ceded the ground. So that everyone now says, oh, abstinence is a laudable goal, but oh, unfortunately, a few people will want to have sex before marriage. I mean, the idea that most people at some point when they feel they're ready would like to have mutually pleasurable, consensual sex and experiment and then maybe finally fall in love and settle down, and that the other experiences will actually be positives in their long life then, hopefully, of marital happiness. This has not become imaginable or sayable anymore.
Yeah, well, what's sayable is to a great extent a function of what the media will allow you to say and who they'll have on. You're standing in a bookstore in New York City talking to us. The idea of either of you being on, America Today, whatever the hell it is, it's unimaginable. I think that things may be more sayable to the extent that the right loses its hammerlock on the media machine. That is their megaphone, if you see what I mean. Let me just, this may sound a bit like off the subject. Proposition 8 passed, but there are about 2 million votes there that haven't even been counted yet, and strong evidence that throughout LA County, I don't want to get into it without sounding like I have tinfoil on my head, but the fact is that there is powerful evidence that Proposition 8 actually failed. But, you know, that's worth looking into because the stakes are enormous.
They are.
You know, and it has everything to do with the difference between how people really feel, what they'll really tolerate when you say it to them, and what they're officially allowed to say.
Right. Well, I was just going to say, when you talked about Good Morning America and all those kinds of shows, I mean, Ann Curry will have an evangelical country singer on whose husband just confessed that he had an affair, and how they then wrote the song together where she ends up forgiving him, God forgives him, and she forgives him. That's doable on morning TV. That's evangelical Republican adultery. That's okay. And one of the things I came up with when I was reading all these, and I discussed this at length in Sex and Crisis, all these evangelical advice books, is that they are bragging about the abortions they forced on girlfriends, on the premarital sex they had, on the promiscuity and the extramarital affairs. They are confessing all their sins. This is like evangelical confessionalism, but with a postmodern twist. It's exhibitionist. It's all out there. And what it does is it actually invalidates your liberal muckraking desires, because they've already confessed their sins. It's already out there. We are such suds, and now we're telling you to do something different. So this is a new technique. And my response to your comment earlier about the oscillation is, on the one hand, the conservatives have already absorbed parts of the sexual revolution and confused us about what feminism means and what sexual liberation means. And of course, they're playing on the ambivalence of sexual revolution left behind. I mean, how do sex and love belong together? What is the role of monogamy in our lives? You know, all that stuff is, I think, very serious for people. And they're playing on all those fears that other people's freedom and your own freedom causes for you. But it's unclear what's going to happen in the future, because it's become very difficult to talk openly about these things, because the right is doing all the chattering. They are the ones who are graphic and explicit, both about the misery and about the hope for joy.
Let me end with a question to you, Wynn. Do you find yourself wishing that your party were bolder in speaking out about things like this? Speaking the microphone.
Speaking about issues of sexuality?
Yeah. I mean, do you wish, for example, that Obama would take a very bold progressive position on abortion rights and gay rights and so on?
Well, yeah, I do. But I have to say that until I started reading Dagmar's book this morning, I wasn't aware of the situation that she describes, or that it was as extreme as she describes it. And so it's something I've just begun to think about. If I conclude it's true, yes, I would like the Democratic Party to start speaking out. Liberals, not so much the party. I'm not sure it's something a party should speak on. But yes, liberals should start speaking out about it, yes.
All right, well, thank you all for coming.